Welcome to the Patriots Pulse post-game show. I'm your host, John Serenitas, and as always, I'm joined by my partner, WEEI's John Lyons. John, how are you this evening?
John, not bad. I think, look, the Patriots lost a really frustrating game, 24-21 to the Bills. They were a lot more competitive than I think a lot of people thought, maybe even more than I anticipated as well. But game, they were up 14-0, had a lead at halftime, and then there was just this avalanche of mistakes, which I know we're going to get into. So on one hand, they competed really well against a legit Super Bowl contender. On the other hand, once again, has been a theme the last 2 years, they lost a game that they probably should have found a way to win.
Yeah, and as I said to you before we went live, not that they weren't a bad football team before this, but in my eyes, they've officially really become a bad football team because bad football teams tend to find ways to lose games that they can win. And they did that in the second half.
Yeah.
You have a 14-0 lead. Buffalo comes back, makes it 14-7. You're leading 14-7 at the half. Third quarter, Buffalo ties it at 14. You're still weathering the storm halfway through the third quarter. All of a sudden, Ramondre Stevenson, he fumbles. They recover. They get the field goal out of it. And then AVP called arguably his best game of the season, I thought, except I don't know why you're throwing a swing screen in that part of the field in that situation. That call made no sense to me. May makes a bad throw. The running back tips it up in the air. I think it was Gibson. And
Stevenson, but yeah.
It was Stevenson. I'm sorry, yeah. It was Stevenson. And it ends up becoming a Buffalo score. Now it's 24-14. Patriots get a late score to make it look a little bit better than it was in the second half. But the bottom line is they did what bad football teams do. Bad football teams don't know how to close out games. And right now the Patriots are in that category. They're a bad football team that doesn't know how to finish. I saw a lot of people on social media questioning why it took Gerard Mayo and this coaching staff this long to coach this aggressively. Well, my response to that is when you're 3-11 playing on the road in Buffalo, 14-point underdog, nobody thinks you really have a chance. You're playing with house money. You might as well be aggressive. It's easy to be aggressive in those situations. They were. I'd like to see the aggressiveness continue the rest of the season. But the bottom line is this was a game they could have won that they gave away, and that in itself is disappointing.
Yeah, I agree. And you look at this second half, right? Because you hit the nail on the head with that Stevenson fumble backwards pass thing that ended up being a touchdown. But you look at what happened. I mean, they're up 14-7. Bills come out, first drive of the second half, go right down the field and score. And frankly, I thought it was a great drive by the Bills. It just a good mix of run and pass. They made some plays, boom. Then you get a Stevenson fumble, which leads to 3 points. Then later on, Drake May throws a bad interception in the end zone, arguably his worst interception of the year. That first one against the Titans might have been his worst, but it's right in that conversation. So he throws a bad interception. So that takes 3 points off the board. That's a 6-point swing right there, John. And then, of course, you have one of arguably the offense's biggest failures of the entire season on an individual play on that backwards pass, fumble, touchdown. What I mean by that is, why are you calling that play inside the 10-yard line? Demontre Jacobs got smoked at the line of scrimmage, totally missed his block. I don't know if that made Stevenson make his route a little bit deeper than it otherwise would have been, but he ends up behind May. May either doesn't recognize it or he does and decides to throw a risky pass like that anyway. He throws it way too hard to a guy 5 yards away from him. Stevenson doesn't catch it. Boom, touchdown. Game's almost over at that point, 24-14. So you had 3 second-half turnovers. All three were and look, every turnover is bad. You and I know that. But it felt all three of these were kind of catastrophic in their own way. Whereas the first one, again, the Bills get a field goal, their first lead of the game. The second one takes points off the board from you. The third one puts the game essentially out of reach and a huge momentum swing there. So it's just, again, they played really well in the first half, I thought. Outside of that one defensive series that James Cook had the 46-yard touchdown run, I thought they played really well on both sides of the ball, especially considering the opponent and the environment. But then in the second half, I mean, part of it was talent. Part of it, I think, was coaching. And as we've said many times this season, a slowness to adjust or being out-adjusted in the second half. And they just ran completely out of gas and started making a bunch of mistakes. And that's what ultimately killed them.
Yeah, and you have to wonder, was that even a factor in the second half of this game? Were they out-coached? Were they out-adjusted? I'm not sure they were. I just think the bottom line is the mistakes caught up to them. And again, I think that when I think of this first season for Gerard Mayo, I think the thing that I will remember the most is the undisciplined play, the penalties, the turnovers, the lack of situational awareness, the lack of communication. Those are the things I put on Mayo and the staff. But when I reflect on this season in a couple of weeks, that's what I'm going to remember. And I know it's easy to say, well, first time head coach in his first year, that stuff's going to happen. And I've been there. I've been a head coach. Granted, it was only at the high school level, but I get it. My teams didn't play as clean as they did in year 2 and 3. But all of that being said, it cost you the game today because, to your point, the Stevenson fumble, the May interception, the lateral, those 3 plays right there resulted in 3 turnovers. You lose the turnover battle, and those 3 turnovers proved to be the difference in the game. I mean, if you score on that drive where May throws the interception, you probably win this game, especially if you score late there. So I just think, as Patriots fans have every right to be frustrated with the situation as it stands. And I think obviously going into today, of course, Ian Rappaport had put out a tweet that the Crafts plan on bringing Mayo back in 2025 unless it was a collapse at the end of the season, which I thought was comical because in my eyes, I'm like, they're 3-11. I mean, how much worse can it get? What, that they lose their last 3, which quite frankly is kind of the expectation around here that they're going to finish 3-14. So I thought that was interesting. It made the Crafts seem like they're waffling on what to do with him. All that being said, I think today helps Mayo's cause. I think he can point to this game and say, look, the guys are still playing hard. They're playing hard for me, despite some key injuries. Again, on defense, no Barmore, no Peppers, young quarterback, suspect offensive line. He can point to this game and say, you know what? This football team is playing for me. So if you're evaluating me, I hope you put a lot of weight into this performance against Buffalo in the first meeting because it's proof that we got the guys ready to play and they're still playing hard for me. But again, all that being said, they're still playing undisciplined football, which, as we know, has been a problem for this team all season.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I felt kind of all along Mayo would be back next year, barring some sort of Urban Meyer level collapse. But I think today really secured it because for all the complaining and criticizing we'll do here, and it's justified, right? They did make a lot of mistakes. You went into Buffalo and you only lost by 3 to a team that could win the Super Bowl. So you did compete. You were right there. Whereas as much of a red flag as the Arizona game was last week, this was kind of the other side of that from a competitive standpoint. But I will say, I mean, John, you mentioned the undisciplined things, and it's an interesting point because it just, on the surface, you look at some of the numbers. The Patriots had more first downs than the Bills. They were better on third down. They had more total yards. They even had an extra drive, same amount of yards per play. And you see that. And Patriots were 2 of 3 in the red zone. Bills only 1 of 1. That's a game that the Patriots should win. Like you look at all those stuff and you're up 14-7. You dominate the first quarter of action. I mean, remember the first quarter, Patriots scored a touchdown, forced a 3-and-out. And at the end of the first quarter, they were on the doorstep of scoring their second touchdown, which ended up being a drive that was just under 10 minutes long. I mean, that's a game again. Even those turnovers, if you only I'm not even saying eliminate them completely. If you only have one of those turnovers instead of all 3, you might still win. Right. So I think that was an issue, in this game. And again, it's part of its talent. Part of it, I think, is some situational coaching. Like I think of Marte Mapu on that interception, taking it out of the end zone and getting tackled at the 1. Like that's something he should know better than that as a pro, but also
another mistake that we didn't talk about.
Yeah. Like, has he been coached on that though? You know what I mean? Like, so he should know better than that, but also the coaches should have the cover of, okay, we address this and guys should know, like you and I know, like, Jonathan Jones isn't going to take that out of the end zone. He knows better, right? But maybe Mapu doesn't. Was he coached on that, right? So that's, again, and I mentioned the Stevenson, the backwards pass touch. Like there's a lot of things there that, did May see it and do it anyway, or did he not see it, right? That's some things that I think have to be answered. So again, it's just, I feel like we say this most weeks, but they were more competitive than last week. Just again, way too many mistakes in this game today.
No, I agree with you. And I, again, like we said, that proved to be the difference. You are watching the Patriots post-game show. I'm your host, John Saranitas. Patriots lose to the Buffalo Bills 24-21 in heartbreaking fashion, if you really think about it, a game, as we've been saying here, that they could have won.
Like, sorry to cut you off, but I was just thinking, like, that end of the game situation. You had 1st and goal from the 1. You can't get it in. You end up getting another penalty. It's 1st and goal from the 1 again. But it took them like a minute and a half from inside the 10-yard line to score a touchdown, which at that point in the game, it's really valuable. And I think that is, and I thought AVP had a good game today overall. I thought that backwards pass thing was a bad call. And I thought down near the goal line, I mean, how many times have they brought in that offensive lineman eligible and run to the right? Buffalo knew it was coming, blew it up. You know, there you go. And then, of course, May drops a snap too. Like, that hurts you. So, again, just those they're not good enough to survive multiple mistakes. Like, they might be able to survive one mistake here and there. Like, you look at some of the game, like the 3 games they've won this year, like Cincinnati, they were pretty much clean that game, but the Jets game, they weren't perfect, right? Like, they can survive maybe one mistake, but when you make a bunch of critical mistakes, they're just not good enough to overcome that.
No, they're not. As I was saying, you are watching the Patriots post-game show. Bills beat the Patriots 24-21, joined by my partner, WEI's John Lyons. Let's dive into the numbers. Drake May, 22 of 36, 261 yards, 2 touchdown passes and a pick. He had a passer rating of 90.2. Patriots rushed for 126 yards, paced by Ramondre Stevenson, who had 12 carries for 60 yards and the touchdown, that 14-yard touchdown run in the first half, rather. Drake May finished second in rushing on the team today, 6 carries for 30 yards. He had a couple big runs to extend drives. Receiving, one of the better days for the receiving core. They finished at 261 yards. Kayshon Boutte, of course, scores the first touchdown on that fade ball. That was an absolute beautiful throw there. I was going to say dime, but I hate the term dime. It's a Kevin
That was the
Stone
best
term.
throw a Patriots quarterback has made since Tom Brady left.
Yes, 100%. But I hate using the term dime. I think
I don't use that word.
I'm a football coach. We don't say dime. That's a stupid fan term.
It was 2 nickels together for a touchdown.
Yeah, 2 nickels equals a dime. Kayshon Boutte, 5 catches for 95 yards and a touchdown. His best game as a Patriot.
Yep.
You know, Austin Hooper, when we look at this season, when we talk about this team's deficiencies, he's been kind of steady Eddie for them. 4 catches, 55 yards. He's been a much better addition for them, John, than Mike Gesicki was last year.
I would agree.
I think he's been more productive, and I'll take it a step further. You brought him in on a 1-year deal. If he wants to keep playing, he's probably a pretty good guy to keep, especially if you can take some meaningful steps next year and be more competitive. He can be a part of that as that you or second tight end. Hunter Henry, again, continues to be Drake May's favorite target, 4 for 39 and a tutty. Pop Douglas, 4 for 33. KB continues to struggle, 2 for 18. He's really been a non-factor since he's been back. And we're getting to the point in the season now with 2 games left where you have to start to wonder if he's even back next year. I mean, the production just hasn't been there. Good friend Lauren Gaudette checks in. I think all that needed to be said is said. A game where Pats had everything going positively or neutral, but Pats imploded on themselves with the worst play of the game. Mapu, or as Bill Cowher called him at halftime, Martang Mamapu, had the interception.
Yeah. How about Canute Rockney? That was the good one from the game.
And Charles Davis totally made that up. I've never heard anyone.
Oh, that was in some book I read. No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't.
That is a lie. Yeah. I have never heard anyone in my life. I'm almost 50 years old. I've never heard anyone refer to Newt Rockney as Canute Rockney. Stevenson with the fumble and lateral fumble. Lauren basically goes over everything we've talked about. Lauren, thanks for checking in. We appreciate it. I mean, bottom line is, as we've said so far, and it's kind of been the theme of the show, good football teams don't lose games like this. Unfortunately, they're not a very good football team right now, and that's why they lost.
Yeah, and we haven't even mentioned the run defense yet. Buffalo, 172 yards on the ground rushing, did whatever they wanted, and it felt like they would, and you know the run game better than I do, but it's like they're running like that same zone play to the outside.
And just stretch. It's all it was. Like, it's outside zone, and he just creased it.
And it's like 6 yards a pop, 8, 10. Like, they're just getting, I mean, you think about it, James Cook had that 46-yard touchdown run, and I know Mayo likes to say, well, if you take out the longest run, we did okay. If you take that run out, he still averaged over 5 yards a carry on 10 carries, so it wasn't good. And then even so they were bad early in run defense, but how about the end of the game? So you don't recover the onside kick. You and I and everybody else knows Buffalo's going to run the ball. First play, 10-plus yard gain on the ground. They got pushed around. They missed tackles. And I thought, again, their secondary in the pass game, I thought was really good today. This was probably Josh Allen, arguably his worst game of the year, or at least toughest game of the year. And I thought their secondary did well. Their pass rush mostly kept him in check. Wasn't perfect, but their run defense was just atrocious. Once again, in this get, and it wasn't even, and you might be able to give a more detailed explanation of this than I can, but from my eyes, it wasn't even like, oh, this guy's in the wrong gap here. And they're getting moved. Like they were just getting pushed backwards off the ball.
When you can't defend outside zone, it's simple. When you're teaching defending outside zone, especially on the first level, it's all about stringing it out. It's all about string it, stack it, separate, and make the play. And if you're not going to be able to make the play, string it out and allow your linebackers and your second level defenders now to play downhill, either hit a gap and make the play from behind or come over the top, spill, and make the play. And unfortunately, Patriots couldn't do that. They got blocked out on the edge. They got blocked down inside, basically, on the 46-yard touchdown run, and Cook was able to crease it, and he scored. And, again, this goes to what we've talked about all year with this team. Their run fits have been atrocious all year. They have played shitty run defense all year. This is nothing new with this football team. And, you crunched the numbers a couple weeks ago. And I thought when you looked at the numbers statistically, comparing this defense last year to this year, I mean, it is night and day. Yeah. They are nowhere near. Last year, the conversation was, is this a top 10, top 15 defense in the league? This year, the conversation is they're a bottom third defense in the league. And quite frankly, they're a bottom 5 defense in the league, pretty much in every statistical category. They have been terrible all year. And that play encapsulates everything that's wrong with this defense right now. And it's easy to say no Barmore, no Bentley, no Peppers. I understand that. But they have enough depth and enough talent on that side of the ball, John. They should be a lot better than they were now. Collectively, they played pretty well today. But again, the run defense has been suspect all year, and today was no different.
Yeah, I mean, it just feels like whenever they need a key stop in the run game, they don't get it. And then they get moved a lot in the run game. And that is just, again, that's a really frustrating thing to see, because that's another thing. I think if you play good run defense today, you might win that game, even with the turnovers and all the other stuff. So you might even win that game despite all that other crap that happened. You might win if you played better run defense. But, once again, they didn't play. I can't think of the last game they played good run defense off the top of my head.
I can't either. And I think it adds to the laundry list of needs that this team has that they need to address this offseason. And linebacker is one of them. The Sione Taki signing. Not a good signing. He hasn't really made a difference. He's more of a special teams player. Jelani Tavai, next to Jawan Bentley, is a much more productive player. When he's the guy, it's a little bit of a different story. So they're not very good inside a linebacker right now. You're missing Barmore. Godshaw, he got his money, but he's considered a top 5 nose tackle in this league, but he doesn't always play like it. There are tackles short inside. I feel that they had more depth in previous years. A guy like Lawrence Guy would have been more valuable.
Miss him right now.
Right, because he can play the 3 tech, he can play the 5 tech, you can play him inside. So, again, I think that that's part of their problem. But the other part of it is, again, fronts. What are you calling? What do the run fits look like in those fronts? Are these guys put in a position where they can play downhill, play fast, get off blocks, and make tackles in the run game? And the answer to that is no. They haven't really been put in that position all year long. Good friend of the show, Lauren Gaudet, checks back in. I want to add that I thought AVP is starting to scheme things up. Even Zolak on the radio in the first half commented that May had throws in rhythm and on time. Yeah, as we said earlier, and again, thanks for checking in, Lauren. Appreciate you as always. As we said earlier, I mean, this was AVP's best game of the season. I thought he called his best game as Patriots offensive coordinator. Going into it, I said this in a lot of our preview stuff, that I felt it was really important for them to cut it loose today and for him to call an aggressive game. And I thought he did that. I didn't love that he opened the game with a screen pass. I thought that was stupid. But by and large, I felt he had his best game of the season as a coordinator. I know that he's been under a lot of scrutiny and there's a lot of speculation. Do you bring him back? Do you not bring him back? One thing you can't deny, outside of the turnovers, which, as we've said, John, is a major problem for Drake May that needs to be addressed. Outside of the turnovers, I do think AVP's done a pretty good job developing the kid. The kid is clearly coming along. He's playing with more confidence. We know the physical tools are there. We can see them. But if you're judging AVP realistically, I think first and foremost, you have to judge him on the development of Drake May, then everything else.
Yeah, and I think there was a stat during the broadcast that May's thrown an interception in 7 consecutive games or something like that. So yeah, that's been a problem. But I agree. I thought that backwards pass call thing, bubble screen, whatever it was a really bad call. And I thought the first and goal run play that I mentioned that got blown up, the way they tried to run to the right with the extra offensive lineman that they've been doing all the time, that was a bad call. Other than that, I thought AVP had a good game. It felt like he had the Bills off balance quite a bit. I mean, there were a couple times guys were open and May missed them, right? Or balls got dropped. There were also, and I give him credit for this because you and I have been really critical of them not doing enough to keep in extra protection, whether it's tight ends, whether it's running backs. Antonio Gibson had 2 huge blitz pickups today. One of them was on the touchdown pass to Kayshon Boutte, which maybe is not even the pass at all if he doesn't pick up that blitz. Another one, it was on the drive that May ultimately threw the end zone interception, but there was a big completion to Boutte on that drive where Gibson had a great pass blitz pickup. And it was, again, a combination of, Gibson made a great play in both of those instances, but AVP kept him in to protect, which is something I think they did not do enough of when Brissett was the starter. And even early on in May's tenure as starter, they didn't do enough of. So I was happy to see that. And again, you have arguably the worst receiving core in the NFL. You have an offensive line that struggles to protect. I thought he got a decent amount of guys open today. I really do. Again, they made some plays. They scored 21 points. And there was a couple plays that were left out there that I put more on May and the receivers than I do on AVP.
And one of the things I want to do as we come down the stretch here with a couple of weeks left in the season is I want to look at May and compare him to the other rookies in this class, the 6 quarterbacks that went in the first round. I mean, Jane Daniels had a monster game today in Washington's 36-33 win over Philadelphia. 24 of 39, 255 yards, 5 touchdown passes. He did throw 2 picks, but 5 touchdown passes, passer rating of 99.1. He also rushed for 81 yards on 9 carries. So obviously he had a monster game. And I think, it's important to realize that, he's more of a dual threat guy, but he and Drake May are pretty much the same guy physically. Michael Penix made his NFL debut today starting for the Atlanta Falcons. He was the other guy we needed to see along with J.J. McCarthy, but Penix, 18 of 27 for 202 yards and an interception, QBR of 46.5. He didn't really do anything to me that stood out. His passer rating was 73.4, but
and his interception hit off Kyle Pitts' hands. Like that should have not been an interception either, in fairness to him.
Right. And I think that that's important, but just going back and watching some of the highlights of that game, I didn't really think he did anything that stood out. Again, it's one game, so we can't judge him on that. Good friend Caleb Williams had a pretty good game against the Lions, all things considered, 26 of 40 for 334 yards and 2 touchdown passes. He had a passer rating of 107.7. Now, here's the thing. I still think Caleb Williams, in my opinion, and we talked about this all spring, and I still believe that the board stacks the same way. I still had May, Daniels, Williams, and then I had McCarthy, then I had Penix and Nix. For me, the Bears are 4-11. So my question to you is Caleb Williams outplaying Drake May right now? If you were in a position where you had to pick one of the two, with the season almost over here, Bears are 4-11, Patriots are 3-12. Who do you take?
Yeah, so first of all, I think Jaden Daniels is playing the best out of the whole rookie group, and I liked him over May in the draft process, but it was close. To answer your question, I would take May over Williams. I think there's and look, you can call it whatever you want to call it, some of the things with Caleb Williams in college, I thought were not going to translate super well
Yep.
to the NFL. Some of like he relied so much on athleticism and so did all this crazy stuff in Lincoln Riley's offense, which was cool. And I'm not telling you he's not good. He won the Heisman for a reason. He's a great player. But I just look at May, I look at Daniels, and you can also add in like the running and jumping in the first row to crying in his mom's lap thing after a game. Like, I don't know. You take that, and I would take Daniels and May over Caleb Williams. And so far, and also it should be added, of all those QBs, May's in the worst situation. Like Jaden Daniels has a better offensive line. He has Terry McLaurin. He's got Cliff Kingsbury, Penix. That Falcons team, you and I have discussed this in the offseason, decent young offensive core on that team. And I know they got a new head coach, but decent young core. Knicks has Sean Payton. Caleb Williams has had a really bad coaching situation, but he's got a lot more talent around him on the field than May does. So May's in the worst situation. And I think he's played the second best. I mean, you can maybe argue Knicks because Knicks is one game, he's been good in one games, but I would put Daniels 1 and May 2 so far this year.
Speaking of Bo Nix, on Thursday night against the Chargers, he went 29 of 40 for 263, 2 touchdown passes, and a passer rating of 106.6. He's had a pretty good year. Both he and Daniels have 22 touchdown passes. I couldn't agree with you more. I think Drake May is far and away in the worst situation of any of these. Defensive head coach, essentially a first-time offensive coordinator, really, if you think about it. Worst receiving core in the league, arguably the worst offensive line in the league. The only plus skill player that he's playing with is Ramondre Stevenson. You could say that maybe Hunter Henry's a B-list skilled player, but the bottom line is Caleb Williams is playing with way more talent. Granted, the offensive coaching isn't great, so that to me is a push. Jaden Daniels, better offensive coaching, plus he has Terry McLaurin and a better offensive line. Bo Nix, better offensive coaching, better skill group, better offensive line. So, yes, those guys, and not only that, but Daniels and Nix have started all year. All three of those guys have started all year. Williams, Daniels, Nix have been playing all year. Drake May did not start all year. So, I think if you put Drake May in any other situation, let's say we even put him in their situations, I think he'd be better than those guys. I felt that coming into it, and I've said this and I'll reiterate it, that he had the most upside. It was all about his development. You could say whatever you want about AVP's play calling, and I know he's been frustrating at times and it's been shoddy, but I do think that he's done a pretty good job developing the kid. And I think that's going to be important for the Patriots moving forward. They clearly have their franchise quarterback. So now it's all about how do you put the supporting cast around him, and how do you teach him to play more disciplined, more responsible, and not be so reckless with the ball and not be so reckless with himself in the way he takes off and he runs and he doesn't protect himself. That's also a problem for him. But, yeah, there's no question that they've got their franchise quarterback. It's going to be interesting to see now what do they do this offseason to support him, what happens on the coaching staff. Lots of questions to be answered. Some final thoughts here, John, before we wrap it up.
Yeah, just that, again, there's a lot to criticize from the second half and how they kind of fell apart and ended up losing this game. I think it was nice to see them compete, though, at the level they competed against a Super Bowl caliber team in the Bills. Now, as you and I know, in the NFL and every level of football, moral victories are kind of a myth, right? You win the game or you lose the game, and they still lost. So is there some things to build on there? The competitive level, how well they played pass defense, the couple drives they had in the first half that they scored on, like those are all really good. But look, until they stop committing a bunch of penalties and until they stop turning the ball over left and right, they're not going to win. So it's just simple as, I know it's not deep analysis, but it's really as simple as that. If they keep committing penalties like this and they keep turning the ball over, they can compete their ass off like they did today, and they're still not going to win.
And by the way, before we go here, I know this is one of Kevin Stone's favorite exercises. Let's start looking ahead and thinking about the NFL draft. After today's loss, the Patriots now have the second pick in the 2025 NFL draft. I don't think that they're going to have a shot at the first pick because the Giants have the Colts and Eagles left, and Colts and Eagles are going to beat them, so they're going to end up finishing 2-15. But I'll be honest with you, man. I'm all in on losing these last two and securing that second pick.
Yeah.
Seriously, because look, if the quarterback board shakes out like we think it's going to shake out with Shadur Sanders and Cam Ward at the top, there's going to be a team that's going to want to move up into that second spot to draft one of those two guys. You got to figure the Giants are going to take a quarterback at one. The Patriots are in a really good spot here to pick up some legitimate draft capital and set themselves up for future success. I would put a for sale sign on that pick as soon if they secure the second pick. I wouldn't even do this with the third pick, but if they secure the second pick, I'm putting a for sale sign on that thing the day after the regular season ends, and I'm saying, come and get it, boys. Who wants it? Whoever is willing to put the most on the table, you get it. And I think if you do that, because let's be honest, who are you going to take there? And I know people are going to say, well, if the Giants take a quarterback, you take Travis Hunter.
No.
Fine, fair enough. I would rather trade the pick, accumulate the capital, and not have Travis Hunter. I'm sorry. That's just the way I
think. And I think Travis Hunter is a phenomenal player, and I think he's been a great story in college football, and I think he's going to be a good NFL player. I do. But I'm 100% team trade down on this. All in, and I don't care if you have the first pick, the second pick, the third, the fourth, even the fifth pick. I want to stay in the top 10, but I'm 100% trading that pick down, taking an offensive tackle, and going from there. I do not want them picking it second overall. And you'll pick a great player. Like if you pick Hunter, he'll be great. If you pick someone else, it should be a great player. But you can pick a great player at pick 8 and get a bunch more capital and improve your team a lot quicker.
And I mean, when you look at the way the rest of the board stacks up, I mean, Jacksonville's not going to take a quarterback. Tennessee could be willing to move up. Clearly, Will Levis, not the guy there.
Mm-hmm.
Cleveland's quarterback situation is wonky. I mean, they're more than likely going to stick with I don't know why I'm drawing
Deshaun Watson is
Watson.
He's got that albatross of a contract. They don't
have and I don't think they have a choice. Now, Vegas at 6 is a team, they need a quarterback. So that's a team that I could see being willing to stomach what it's going to cost to move up 4 spots. So they could potentially be interested in moving up. The Jets is another team that could be interested in potentially moving up to take a quarterback, depending on what they do. So realistically speaking, you have Tennessee, you have Las Vegas, possibly the Jets. After that, when you look at the rest of the top 15, there really aren't any teams there. I mean,
the Saints, New Orleans, maybe. Yeah, that would be the one. Yeah.
Other than that, they're the only one. So my point is there aren't going to be a lot of teams that are going to be in the market for quarterback, but there's going to be at least 2. So you can slap the for sale sign on that pick and say, hey, you want to take one of those guys or Travis Hunter, come up and get it. If you think Travis Hunter is worth trading 4 or 5 spots up for, come get him. We're ready to sell. And at that point, you can take McMillan, you can take Campbell, you can take Banks. They're going to have a lot of options there if they're still in the top 10. They'll still get a pretty good player, and they'll have some additional draft capital to work with. All right, well, that'll do it for this week's episode of the Patriots Pulse post-game show. Again, the Patriots lose to the Buffalo Bills 24-21 in a game that they could have and probably should have won. For WEI's John Lyons, I'm John Serenitas. We'll be back with you next Saturday. The game's been flexed. 1 p.m. kickoff. We'll be back with you after the game. Until then, Merry Christmas. Enjoy the week, and we'll talk to you next Saturday. Peace.